One of the words that I use every single day of the school year was family. As I greeted my students in the morning with my morning message, it was good morning to my North Tech family. So I'm establishing the fact that we are a family, but then I'm also teaching what it is to be a family in terms of us as a student body now first, having one another's back, looking out for one another, being there for one another, as opposed to ridiculing one another, denigrating one another, but building this sense of family and then doing the same thing with staff. So family is the word I think of. When I think about obstacles to school improvement, I'm really thinking of urban schools. I'm thinking of some rural schools as well, but I'm primarily thinking urban. I'm thinking tough urban districts, tough urban cities. And one of the biggest obstacles that I find is the pressure to perform on standardized assessments, but forgetting school climate and culture. And I say that school climate and culture trump everything else that we do. That climate, which I define as the mood of the school, has to be conducive to a youngster having a willingness to soar within that school. But then when I look at the culture, which I'm defining as the lifestyle of the school, that lifestyle has to be one such that outside I may be who I am and whatever pressures and demands that I have to conform to, but once I come into that building, I can just kind of let my guard down, take my mask off and just be me and give forth maximum effort, but there's got to be a culture in place and a climate in place that enable me to do so. In addition to that, is telling young people that they are somebody, telling young people that they are great, telling young people that they are extraordinary. Often I survey staff, teachers, principals, or whomever, and I ask them, how often do your children hear from you that they are special? How often do they hear from you that they are great, that they are extraordinary, that they are somebody? And in many cases, in most cases, teachers will admit to me that I guess I don't tell them that every day. I said, but these kids in particular, they're the ones that need to hear it. They need to hear every day that there's somebody and that the possibilities for their lives are limitless. When we talk about building relationships with students from the vantage point of the principal, I always recommend the principals that your first point of contact with the youngster has got to be outside of that building in the morning when they're approaching school. So it just does my heart well when I can go to a school and I see that principal outside. I don't care if it's 20 below zero. I see that principal outside shaking hands, saying good morning, with a smile on his or her face, welcoming those young people into the building. In the last school that I was principal of for 6 years, a high school, there were metal detectors and x-ray machines and conveyor belts at the front door. Well, I couldn't let that be the first thing that my young people saw. I needed it to be me, the leader. So that regardless of the weather outside, they saw me with a smile, with a handshake, with a hug, to let them know that I'm glad to see you, welcome, and let's have a strong day. As young people approach your room, teachers got to be right there at that classroom door. And I'm talking about just to start the process, to welcome young people into that room, to welcome them to that classroom, to welcome them to another day or another period or another block of learning. And then within that classroom, as the period proceeds, relationship always at the front of the teacher's mind, that it's not just my subject area, it's not just the content area, but it's the child first. So I've got to make sure that I know this child knows me. I know this child beyond the name on the roster. I know this child beyond the same youngster that sits at the same seat every day. I know this child's story. I know his or her experiences and realities, challenges and obstacles, needs and interests, goals and aspirations, and including the way that this child processes information. So I know the child beyond just a name or a number. This is my student, because relationships and compassion for student matters. One of the most overlooked component in improving schools, I would say, is school brand. I talk about school brand a lot. I don't see a lot of information written on school brand, on the topic of school brand. I think I want to write a book on school brand, because school brand is saying, what is your image? Who are you? What is your identity? How are you perceived by the outside, but how do you see yourself? And one of the things that I do in these conversations with teachers on School Brand, I'll ask 10 teachers, just give me in a sentence or two describing who you are as a school. Who are you? What is your identity? And I can already predict before we start the process that each of those 10 teachers are going to give a different response. So therefore, there's dysfunction within the school relative to the identity of the school. That translates into students going into a school every day where from class to class to class, there's a different perception of who we are. So school brand is critically important.